welcome everyone to our panel, Financing the Climate Transition. Picking up on Charlie's comment yesterday, perhaps what we're talking about is transitioning finance for climate and much more. That's our challenge. And we've got a really exciting group of people with us today. Let me introduce to you Günther Schiendl, who is the head of the CIO of the largest pension fund in Austria with 7 billion euro under asset management. We'll be looking at how large finance is constructed and can be constructed for impact. We have Grabenwarter, who is the Deputy Director of Equity Investments for the European Investment Fund in Luxembourg. How do you invest in small and medium businesses to get impact is the challenge there. Online we have Felicity Spors, who is the Director of Sustainable Finance for Gold Standard, the standard setting group who really knows about impact standards, how to measure impact at quality. And that's critical for making this work. And I'm excited to welcome Tom Duncan, who is the head of Earthbanc, BANC. This is a new startup doing digital financing into communities like India, farmers in India and many other places. We'll hear how to finance impact digitally and get it up to bond scale. This is extraordinary. So this panel is, I think this is it's a really important discussion. We've come a long way since the last Impact Day that I was attending. There's a massive amount of money now being freed up as oil and gas money is liberated from the asset funds. There's a lot of money shifting out of government subsidies and looking for places to put itself, and so on. For me, I started my career sitting 30 metres up a eucalypt tree in the forests of Tasmania to save these trees. I'm actually a conservationist. I'm dressed up like this so I don't scare these guys. But we lost those three trees, they were cut down, but we saved the forest. And it wasn't the protest. Protests were part of it. It was finance in the end that saved those forests. 300,000 hectares of forest. 80-metre tall trees are now all World Heritage. And what happened, took 20 years, but working with Patagonia, the head of Patagonia, we bought the wood chip mills. And my friend, one of the tree sitters, went in one night with a welder and started to chop these things apart. What fun! But that's not responsible. What they then did was look with the community. How do they transition from being a wood chip community to being a community of purpose and impact? And they had a whole set of businesses ready to go for investment. Some of them got investment, not enough. And that's the challenge now. How do we take those sort of communities and transition them from producing coal or producing wood chips and so on to producing purpose? Money with meaning. That's our challenge. We'll be talking about not only how to get the money, how to create $100 million instruments for purpose. How do we make sure we get real impact out of those? How do we multiply our impact? If we're investing in carbon, how can we also get those investments to work for biodiversity or for water or for health? So investment, multiple impacts at once. And then how do we put this in the hands of the people who live in those landscapes, who run those businesses, and have them create more of these sorts of instruments? That's the discussion today. And what I'm going to do, we'll do 2 rounds with our panellists. We'll discuss first what's happening in each of your industries and where you see the most exciting innovations that are coming. Then we'll go back again and look at what the future looks like from each of your perspectives. And then we'll have a discussion about how to bring that together. And then it's over to you. We'll be inviting questions from the audience and from the online audience as well. Sound all right? Good. So Günther, you live in a world of very large finance, and your pension fund, VBV pension fund, is really taking some risks. You're investing not only in Europe, but across the world in some of the most challenging emerging markets on Earth. I presume this is true?
This is true. This is true, yes.
What does that look like? Tell us a little bit about what you're constructing, and what's the most exciting project initiative for you at the moment?
Yeah. Well, before I begin, I would like to say thanks to Angelika. It is a pleasure being here, and it's a pleasure because this is a complementary world to my professional world. There are so many young people sitting here. There's so much enthusiasm. There is ambition, there's technology, there's science. And this is very complementary and important to the world that I'm in. And I'm not only in this world, clearly. Now, the impact, I would say the real impact is the idea. The money will follow the idea. And the other real impact is the regulation. And the finance guy in Europe these days are very strange guys because they really welcome European sustainable finance regulation. And several friends of mine wearing similar suits like me, working in similar jobs, they say, you know what, Günther? Now we got the meaning. Now we got the meaning at the later stage of our career. We know what we have to do. And yes, we know what we have to do. We need to fully change our investment portfolios to make them compliant with climate change. What have we done? Or to say, what is my responsibility? My responsibility is for 400,000 people. These are young people who will get a pension in 30 years, and these are older people who get a pension right now. So the point is, I see and I feel my responsibility in the faces of people that I meet. Now, we are managing 7.5, approaching 8.5 billion euros. By European standards, that is at least middle class. But I think where we are among the leading institutions in the world is equity climate change investing. Our equity portfolio is about 3.5 billion euro. And about half of that money is in dedicated climate transition and carbon reduction strategies. That is listed equity for the time being. We have adopted the Paris Agreement climate benchmark, so to say. And we have set the goal for the total monies in our funds, so for the 8 billion, that by 2030, we will be on the path to the 1.5 Paris climate goal. This is not meaning we will have a portfolio of about 1.5% degree, but it's the path. And why did we say 2030? This is in, a little bit more than 8 years, because we have to act now. And as I said, I'm coming from the listed equity and listed securities world predominantly, but not only. So we have the deep conviction that over the next 3 to 5 years, we will see a dramatic policy change in Europe. The UNPRI, that is an organization that is extremely valuable in my point of view. The UNPRI has done an analysis 2 years ago, and they presented it as the inevitable policy response. This is, in my opinion, absolutely realistic. What it means is that policymakers, by and large, will be doing much too little, much too late. And this is a shame to say what the Austrian government is not doing in this respect. That is a shame what we have here. But others are probably more advanced. Now the point is, they say California is burning 2 times a year. We have now seen Europe burning over the summer, the Arctic Circle is burning, the Russian tigers burning, and so on and so on. So I think nobody in Europe, in Middle Europe, the flooding, which is what I forgot, nobody is able to oversee that climate change is already here. It is not something in the future, it is already here. And if we act now, we can prevent the worsening of the situation. And it will take another 10 to 20 years that the situation might get better. Now, if we invest, and this is a cornerstone of our equity strategy, in innovation companies, digital companies, real-world companies, whatever, that provide solution to climate change, climate transition, then we think we can speed it up. Yeah? So this is what we do here. We will transport the same system that we have for the equity portfolio onto the corporate bond portfolio, which means that depending on the plan asset mix, between 50% and 75% of plans assets will very soon be aligned with this Paris climate goal. Now, I'm doing a little bit of simplification here, clearly. But this is what we are doing. Now,
Can you give me an example of one of those investments? One that you're most proud of?
I tell you about an investment that we will do very soon. That is an infrastructure investment where we will be contributing money to a fund in Denmark who will invest into building hydrogen production, Wasserstoffproduktion. This is one example. And this will be a green hydrogen investment. And we just had an in-house seminar last Friday on green hydrogen technology. And I can tell you, this makes a damn lot of fun with all the finance guys sitting together and having a lecture from the Austrian Institute of Technology on hydrogen, green hydrogen technology. Now, do we need, as a pension fund, do we need to know it? We feel yes, we should, because we have the responsibility of investing other people's money into the future, into future projects. So we should understand at least the essentials on the technical side. 2 minutes, then I will make a break.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's fairly okay. What I wish to tell the young people here and to all the people out there seeing and so forth is the meetings that the finance guys like me today, over the last 2 years, had with other finance guys, with the regulator, with the Ministry of Finance, the Austrian Ministry of Finance, with the Austrian Ministry of Environment. There are sitting people of every age, young people, elder people, and they share a conviction that you would not dream about. You would not dream about that finance people, Ministry of Finance, then clearly the environmental department, the regulator, they share this enthusiasm. And there are so many people around, which is so broad in Austria, and I suppose in Europe as well, who wish to change, who see the change. The only thing that is missing is at the very top of European governments some real strategic moves.
Yeah.
This is the only thing that is missing.
It's true, isn't it? Thank you very much, Günther. And I agree, I sat on the Agriculture Committee for the EU Sustainable Finance Taxonomy, so I was inside Brussels, and it was exciting what they were doing to bring it together. but it didn't quite come together. And the governments say the right thing, but they're just not going forward. It's the finance industry I see that's setting very high standards and trying to live up to it, and that's not easy. Uli, you're working a lot with Brussels. You're based in Luxembourg. You're investing in businesses. That taxonomy is going to change the game for businesses. They're going to have to prove that they're reducing their carbon emissions. But tell me more about your world and where do you see the opportunities to invest at scale in business, and how does that then achieve impact?
Yeah, I think if we look at the challenging for climate transition, we need to look at it from two different angles. Scale is obviously one of them, because without the scale, we are not going to get to the tipping points in where we need to be in order to prevent the projections that have been made by scientists all over the world. But the other element that we need to look at is the question of where do we get the innovation from that allows us to prevent that course of action. And I think EIF in our activity, we are very much linked to this innovation part, because we are the biggest venture capital investor in Europe, and as a fund-of-fund investor, we are investing roughly 1.6 to 2 billion in investments every year in European venture. Last year, even more because of the COVID crisis, and the next year to come, probably even we're stepping up again. But the objective is not the volume. The objective is that we need to spark disruptive innovation that actually can substitute practices that we have been applying in the past that have led us to the situation where we are today, and of which we know today that they are not sustainable. And coming back to what Günther said in terms of the enthusiasm that is there around with policymakers and governments and the ministers and the finance industry, I do share that this awareness is kind of sinking in pretty much everywhere, that we need to do something. But what I'm missing, I think, and probably that's what you were referring to when you said that it's not really coming together yet, it's the sense of urgency. And the sense of urgency can only come, unfortunately it seems, through the events that we've been experiencing over this summer. We are facing today a situation where the financial industry, and in particular the insurance industry, is in front of parts of their business model of risks that they have insured in the past that cannot be insured anymore. Because insurance makes only sense if you can predict a probability of an event to occur. But if that probability becomes certainty, then your product doesn't make sense anymore. And that's the stage where we are at now. And I think that is the element where the financial community starts getting interested in the innovation, because we need to substitute things that we've been doing in the past, not just by shifting into new ways of doing business, of creating companies going forward, but also to change business practices in very traditional industries today. And that's the kind of bridge of cross-fertilization that I see that we are instrumental in enabling.
Like we were hearing from Bayer, who own Monsanto of all companies now. That's a big shift that they're going to have to carry. Can you give an example of one of the projects that you're most excited about?
We are fund of funds, which means that we are investing in funds that invest in companies, but we have got, I think, in virtually every of our portfolios, we've got exciting companies that work in the question of e-mobility to ensure, for instance, efficiency of battery efficiency, that we get the problem of energy storage solved. Because 10, 15 years ago, we had a problem of production of renewable energy. That's solved. We are beyond that today. We know that we can get to the scale, we can get to the capacity. We've beaten the objectives of grid parity for renewable energy with fossil energy. But we have the issue to solve: how can we store energy at scale in order to, for instance, enable the steel industry to move from fossil-driven production cycles to hydrogen-driven production cycles. That's for that we need ability to find storage capacity and the technologies that we are funding, amongst others, directed to that.
That must be really exciting to be able to drop a little money into a pond like that and see the ripples, or a lot of money.
It's exciting, but it's very humbling at the same time, because you realize that you are only dropping something into the thing, but
you're just
the waves are basically residing with the entrepreneurs that you're backing.
Yep, very much. Thank you. Let's move on to Felicity. So Felicity has worked in many parts of the finance industry, the World Bank included, in building financial instruments. She's now on the other end with Gold Standard, setting the standards. How do you measure impact? How do you get real quality in carbon? That's the Gold Standard is one of the two standards that the conservation organisations of the world endorse. I mean, there's many others as well, but I think it's really at the top in the quality of the way that it verifies carbon emissions. There's many others to choose from. But Felicity, how do you make this incredibly complex world with 1,000 standards out there, 1,000 people trying to do their best? It must be like when motor cars first arrived on the streets. You had horses bumping into motor cars, and when you came to a crossing, how do you deal with going across the crossing? Somehow someone invented a traffic light, a very simple system, green, orange, red, and there were less accidents. But that's where we are now with dealing with carbon, biodiversity, and all of the other impact metrics. How is Gold Standard taking that forward?
Thanks very much, and thanks for inviting me to speak today. It's a real pleasure to be here. Is there an echo coming back? I hear an echo. Okay, it's good, it's gone. So Gold Standard is a standard that is trying to define what is best practice with two aims. It's trying to ensure that we can understand what is possible and we can reward those who are achieving good impacts. So the way that we do it is we work through effective working groups to define our standards, and we are endorsed by the World Wildlife Fund, and we've been working for 20 years. We're most known for working in the carbon markets, but we also work with corporates who are looking to improve their supply chain. So they have a kind of a series of activities that are in their supply chain, and it's in their interest to ensure the supply chain is stable. And to be stable, it needs to be sustainable. And so you'll find corporates talking automatically about water, biodiversity, resilience, and environment in a way that some people only focus on climate. And we also work with the financial sector, which come from a mental space of environmental, social governance push. But it's different. And I think the first thing I have to clarify is that the ESG world is like a photograph of a footprint. Where am I today? And you make a prediction about where you want to get to, Paris aligned, and then you make sure that the numbers are sort of coming down and you adjust if you think something's going wrong. An impact measurement says or promises that everything you invest in has a positive impact. You claim a sustainable development impact, you're saying, this investment is contributing. So you have a very positive story. And in response, we're also driving ambition through that story, because you're not just avoiding and managing a risk, you're committing to you making sure that every penny drives a positive contribution to sustainable development. And that's why Gold Standard measures impact claims. And actually, there's a difference because it has a baseline. You have to see what happened before in order to claim there was an impact, there was a change. And so this is where Gold Standard sits. And in general, what we really want to do, you mentioned a lot of metrics. There's a lot of metrics, and there's different standards. Some standards focus on a product, a single product like coffee or cocoa beans, fair trade, for example, or you focus on forestry. We focus on an integrated approach. And that comes from being so long in climate, where you see the perverse incentives if you only focus on climate and you don't actually look at the other aspects. and you undervalue things. So I think in forestry, we undervalue the eco-services. We can only monetize the carbon, but actually the true value of a forest is not just the carbon, it's all the other things it brings, but we can't monetize it yet. So our standard deliberately requires, if you want to be gold standard, that you look at climate mitigation and or adaptation, and at least 2 other sustainable development goals. And I think our engagement, to give you an example of how this is helping finance, we're currently working on a blended finance vehicle. So blended finance being the aim of public money to catalyze or bring in private money to areas it's currently not going. So this is speaking to the need for ambition, because finance is and a good reasons, as Günther has said, they're managing pensions, is looking for a good rate of return and some sort of guarantee, because they're managing people's futures. You know, old people need to live off a pension. But in order to try and learn how to do things differently and to work with people where money's currently not flowing, you need an incentive. So that's the blended finance part. And we are working in a fund which is we're still raising money. So we got some money from the Green Climate Fund of 150 million for equity investments. And we're capitalizing 600 million on the side. And we is Gold Standard, IUCN, which is the International Union for Conservation and Nature, Pegasus Impact Investors, BNP Paribas, and R20, a cities organization. And we're targeting smaller infrastructure. And this is what's different to the funds that Günther was mentioning, and is more like the sort of SME level of 5 to 75 million. And the importance of Gold Standard's role in this is that we are encouraging at the selection stage that the consideration of the impacts as well as the internal rate of return. And that's because the economics we have today for driving our money, it might give us a nice pension so we've got money, but if we've got lots of money and no forests, something's wrong. And so Gold Standard is encouraging the valuation of the co-benefits by ensuring that even at project selection and the development of a fund, you're considering the value of the other sustainable developments. And this is very innovative. And it's also an uncomfortable discussion we're having, because as Gold Standard, we have to sometimes accept a project which is perhaps not so great on the impact. So a straightforward renewable energy project with solar, which you can see makes profit. It is additional, but it's not as good, for example, as an affordable housing project, which is very complicated, has a leasing, but doesn't make a good rate of return. And it's this balance across a portfolio, a bigger sort of a whole series of projects that is allowing a hedging approach to modify the internal rate of return. So you can have low SDGs, high internal rate of return, and the other way around. And this is enabling a greater footprint. We don't have the scale for blended finance we need to really understand and learn how to do this hedging across the fund. I'd like to, there's lots of, I could talk.
There's going to be some good discussions about that one.
Yeah, so I'll stop there.
This is where it gets really interesting, isn't it? Because you're not just investing in individual businesses or in individual funds. You're creating a fund that can invest across a range of businesses, get a range of different impacts, but then you can create synergies between those businesses to get more impact, and you can aggregate the impacts across those businesses so that you're really getting quality impacts. I think that's where we're going, these sorts of instruments. And Gold Standard is requiring three types of impacts in every investment. I think that's quite a radical idea and something that all investors could start thinking about. Thank you.
A minimum of 3.
Minimum
We're happy
of
to
3.
take more.
Okay, yeah. Don't stop there. Don't stop at 3. Tom. So we've heard a lot about big money, big businesses. This money tends to get to the people who can still handle large amounts, and even when it gets down, it does have impact for small players. But what you're doing, I think, is quite radical. A digital solution for getting finance to small actors who are taking big action on their land or in their business or in their community. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Earthbanc does and about one of the more exciting projects that you have on your books?
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here, Paul, in this event. It's bringing together a really amazing group of people to talk about yeah, some of the most important things needed in the planet right now. I guess at Earthbanc, we've been working on community reforestation projects in India, in the Sundarbans, which is the world's largest mangrove ecosystem on the planet. It spans across the borders of India and Bangladesh. It's where some of the most climate vulnerable communities are, and where infrastructure is regularly inundated in hurricane-driven storm surges, people losing their homes, losing infrastructure, which takes a heavy toll economically, socially, and ecologically. So what we've been doing there is working with communities that are underbanked or unbanked. And what we've done is we've got a carbon restoration project, which we do sell the carbon via our carbon marketplace. But we've also packaged up some microfinance loans into it. And so what we've done is we've combined, I guess, there's the ecosystem restoration, which is trying to rebuild a green shield to protect that community's infrastructure. It would probably help if we had access to easy parametric insurance products or something like that, but we don't yet. So we took the approach of essentially financing the microfinance institutions that we worked with, and we provided banking as a service technology to digitize the microfinance operations, which traditionally had been in handwritten books and stamps, and guys collecting cash on the back of a motorbike was essentially their banking infrastructure. But it was these communities that were also cutting down the mangrove forests for sometimes less than $2 a day. And so what it was about was finding what are the incentives we can find to help these communities stop cutting down the mangrove forest so that their home doesn't get swept away this year. And really what the incentive was carbon payments, but the other big incentive was honey bee production. So producing organic wildcrafted honey, which they could get a premium from, but they needed finance to actually, all the facilities, the beekeeping equipment, the honey processing to get it to a good quality and get it to market. And so what we did was we combined the sales of the carbon and the returns from the microfinance loans into essentially a small blended green digital bond, which we issued on a central bank blockchain in 2020. And the idea there is to, using distributed ledger technology, is to really reduce the costs of green bond issuance. And HSBC has estimated you can reduce green bond issuance costs by tenfold using this approach, which we then validated with our innovative technology. After that, we said, well, how can we help monetize smallholder carbon? Some of these people have less than 2 hectares. Some of them have as small as 200 square meters. So we got some support from the European Institute for Innovation and Technology on the EIT Climate Kick Nordic program. So it's interesting, gentleman earlier mentioned the innovation program in Europe and how it's a big part of why we're able to develop climate technology solutions in Europe is because of these essentially government-led programs, which is so important. And I come from a background of government programs in Australia, where I'm originally from, but now based in Sweden. And ecosystem services markets were very important in creating markets that function first, and then public-private sector partnerships can then scale them. But getting back to what we got support from European Institute for Innovation Technology, we were in the decision metrics for climate finance stream. And so we started doing a pilot with Swedbank, Sweden's oldest bank, on integrating decision metrics into their business banking. So it's actually remarkably similar whether you're working with a large bank or working with a microfinance institution. The way we look at risk and grade risk and embed that into financial reporting, there's actually a lot of similarities. So we've been delivering carbon reporting services under a pilot to Swedbank, done some climate finance adaptation work with the African Development Bank, and now we're looking to scale up our carbon marketplace and green digital bond issuance to scale up this kind of successful model of blending different streams of income to help essentially bootstrap more carbon projects. But particularly, we got some backing from the European Space Agency under their incubated grants. And we've now got some patent pending sort of artificial intelligence for remote sensing and satellite imagery optimization to measure carbon remotely, which brought down the cost of carbon verification to about 4 euro cents. So we're trying to really drastically reduce costs of sampling. And together you bring together a few innovations, and hopefully you can start to make projects, much smaller projects, bankable. And that's at the landscape level by aggregating lots of smallholder projects together so that landscape restoration can become an investable asset. And it needs to be with, we're in the decade of landscape restoration. The IPCC report is putting the pressure on, and yeah, so that's what we're trying to solve these problems and work with financial institutions, asset managers, to enable the last mile of climate finance to get out of Europe, North America, many Western nations into the sort of front line of climate change, to that last mile of climate finance.
It's an exciting world, isn't it? When you think of these new models that are coming and the amount of money that might be available for them, putting them together. We in the Landscape Finance Lab are developing a program to save the reefs of Fiji from the impacts of climate change. And the greatest solutions are coming from the business world. 120 businesses have been screened who can make a positive contribution to saving the reefs. So there's biodiversity and carbon and livelihood benefits coming from that, but how to get the finance in and how to make it work across all of those businesses in a common way. Günther, is Tom going to put you out of business?
No.
Or are these models compatible?
Well,
or more than that?
Oh. I think what Tom said and Felicity said, these are important building blocks. Yeah? But I think one word I have not yet heard in this panel, and probably the rest of the panel just before, that is focus. In my opinion, we need to focus on certain impact goals to be able really to deliver a focus. If we just make broad shots, I don't think we will be able to deliver the impact that we can deliver if we have a focus. And I think our focus is climate change. What Felicity said, it's a wonderful idea. So I see there a financial product in the future where I can buy a financial portfolio delivering an expected return of 7%, plus an SDG impact, which is equivalent to 3%. And maybe there will be another portfolio with a financial return component and an impact component. This is probably something that will come. And in my business, that is a challenge in our communication back to our members. I mean, just a very simple example. We have reduced the carbon in our equity portfolio by 300,000 tons per year. If we multiply this by a market price for carbon of, let's say, 100 euro per ton, this makes a financial equivalent of 30 million euro. So this is a lot of money, yeah? And the challenge clearly is it's not so easy to express everything in money terms, maybe other terms, but why not in money terms as well, yeah? So this is, I think, what Felicity is working on, has a great potential in my opinion, and all the work that Tom has mentioned, microfinance in combination with carbon and with so many things. So the good thing is the real strength of the financial sector is its innovation capacity. Yeah? So there are brilliant people in the financial industry as there are in an environmental industry and as there are in the governments and the regulator these days. But the financial industry can deliver a lot of things. This is what the European legislation has just made at the starting point of its policies. Yeah? Count on the financial sector. As a member of the financial sector, I would wish that the real world economy is coming up with the same initiatives and force as the financial sector.
So I want to follow up on this 300,000 tons and the 30 million value of that, or whatever its value is. We're trying to do the same to save the peatlands of Ireland and find a way to reward farmers and other actors who are protecting peatlands and restoring peatlands. Who gets the value is the question. Who gets that money? And how do you make sure that it's transferred down to the people who really generate?
I'm not from the investment fund business, but this is probably their business chance, designing such products where, as a consumer, I give €1,000 to the fund, and the fund invests this in your projects and his projects and her projects. So this is a transformation of financial assets into environmental assets. So it's not necessarily my business, but maybe we will come up with an idea as well. Yeah. But again, that's the financial industry.
Let's explore that together. Felicity, how do you make sure that the money gets to the people who really make the change, not to all of the actors along the chain, the money chain?
I'd like to first of all react to something Günther said about focus on carbon and climate. And I think it's really important to stay focused on climate, because that is one of the issues that we've really got to deal with in a short amount of time, biodiversity as well. But I just wanted to add that you can't just look at climate, because it results in very perverse incentives, which we've seen in forestry, where if you only look at forests as a sink, then you're going to end up building plantations. Is there an echo? I don't know whether it's me on this side.
No, you're okay.
So that's the importance of trying to keep this holistic angle. And I really agree with Günther, we can't monetize the other yet. But to try and encourage people to think through the impacts of any investment in terms of more than climate is very important, because ecology is interlinked. Water, biodiversity, land, desertification, soil, as well as climate are also terribly interlinked. And although that's terribly complex, and that's what our organization is doing, we're trying to make it simple. We're trying to create metrics which can be understood by the finance sector, which are used to metrics, numbers that you can put into a spreadsheet. So we're trying to do the complicated analysis, but So in response to how do we get this down, and the attribution question, which is very, very critical, I think the answer lies in the sourcing. And at the moment, we're thinking in Gold Standard about the importance of, if the problem is, if you're let's just take Levi's jeans, right? So you source your cotton from Burkina Faso and somewhere else, but you don't know when you'll make your jeans whether those jeans are from Burkina Faso or Africa. Who did the low carbon jeans and who did the non-low carbon jeans? Because you just buy bulk from the multiple suppliers, usually from a region. And so in order to solve the attribution problem, you need aggregation. And this is where innovation is needed. And this is to actually bring farmers from an entire sourcing area. And that could just be in Africa, but maybe it's across India and Africa. They need to meet the same standards. And that can't be just provided by just Levi. It's all the people using cotton from those sources. And if we could get that kind of collaboration, which is, I think, Paul, what you're doing and doing so brilliantly, where you could get people to agree to doing that from a sourcing area, you could overcome this attribution problem, because it is a serious problem.
Purpose. Yeah, it's a massive challenge, isn't it? But it's starting to happen, and what Tom is doing, if you can add a digital layer to the whole thing, it makes it much easier to track whether they're green jeans or brown jeans, even though they're all blue jeans. Uli, where do you see this all going from the world of business and finance? What's the most exciting directions from your point of view?
I think listening to all the contributions on the panel, the biggest challenge, but at the same time the biggest opportunity that I see in creating this transparency about the contact of businesses and what type of impact is produced. And obviously we've got on one side this opportunity to define upfront objectives that then can be tracked down the road, and that gives comfort to the financial industry to associate to financial return targets, also impact targets and things like that. But the biggest opportunity that I see and the biggest game changer is the measurability of impact in order to create a basis for monetizing it, and not monetizing it just for compensating responsible choices in a supply chain or alike, but to really shift business models from certain things being remunerated today towards things that have not been remunerated until today, but are relevant for our sustainability in the future. And you can take the agricultural industry as an example for that. If you look at how the agricultural industry functions today, we are basically paying our farmers to exploit our natural resources to the biggest possible extent.
Yeah.
Because their margin depends on how much they can actually extract from one piece of land.
Yeah, yeah.
And if we actually got in our agricultural design to a mindset where we are able to quantify the value to society from the sustainability of the resources, lands that we are farming on, and are able to compensate the farmer for that contribution of preserving land, of preserving water resources, of preserving the fertility of the soil that we are working with,
Yep.
we have got a totally different spectrum of business models that we can look at.
It's what our friend from Bayer was saying yesterday, saying in the last session, that to incentivize farmers to build the perfect impact, to restore the ecosystem. Money is just a metaphor for meaning, isn't it? For value. It was invented to be a way of putting a token on value in society. And over the last couple of 100 years, the money market has been about creating more money. The meaning has been the money. But we're now in an extraordinary point where we're adding other values onto that money. And Tom, the digitization of this is perhaps where it gets most significant, because then the transactional value of money can be equal to the carbon value or the biodiversity value or the community value of money. Where do you see the future?
Yes, I think I agree with what you've both said here, and my view is also
I have to ask you to speak up.
Yeah, I would say the future of money is that the values and what we actually value, so biodiversity, soil fertility, all of the things that we value, I think will start to be reflected in money, like soil fertility, soil organic carbon, water purification in the landscapes, so that we don't get toxic algal blooms and fish kills, and so that we're restoring fish spawning grounds and seagrasses. You know, it wasn't that long ago I was doing a natural capital valuation of seagrasses in the Melbourne Port Phillip Bay. And, you know, we estimated that it was worth about $12 billion of annual ecosystem services. And, you know, setting up an ecosystem services market was certainly one way to kickstart the investments and incentivizing farmers across 1.3 million hectares to start purifying the water that runs off their land by regenerative farming activities. Now, that was 2007. The world's come a long way since then with digital technologies. So the future I see is where you have artificial intelligence, satellite, remote sensing, distributed ledger, where you can start to automate a lot of functions which in the past were just too expensive to carry out, and too manual and too exclusive. It cut many people out of the opportunities. I think now we've seen, you know, examples of Costa Rica, where for many years landholders have been incentivized for providing ecosystem services. Many examples of ecosystem services marketplaces in many countries now whether it's Australia, USA, and there are some popping up around Europe. I think the role of the private sector in technology and innovation and government to create good policy and help form good markets and responsible and ethical markets is upon us now. And what I would hope to see is real big action at the top of government to really encourage this innovation to happen. Because if you don't get ahead of the curve, it's very hard to catch up on digitization and AI and blockchain. So I think this is where we're at an inflection point.
Yep. And we're lucky to have financiers who are really on board with this as well, with these sorts of direction, and are willing to experiment. That's critical. I think let's experiment. Well, let's flip the conversation and hand it over to you in the audience and online. Sophie, do we have any questions online at the moment?
One question online, but I really want to take the opportunity to encourage everyone to still submit your questions. We have a couple minutes left, so please take that opportunity. And the same for the studio, so please just raise your hand and voice your question. In the meantime, more a general question, what in your eyes is the most helpful tools that financial institutions and funds like you have at your disposal to create meaningful change in the climate transition?
Wow, most powerful tools. Sir, want to start?
One of the most powerful tools are probably not from the finance industry itself. I think these are the SDGs. These are the SDGs. These are the new language. These are the new goals. And I think deciding the focus on which SDGs to focus, that will bring us forward.
And Felicity, there's 1,028 indicators for the SDGs, which is crazy, far too many. How do we simplify that? That's what you guys are doing.
Yeah, radical alliances. But I would also say carbon price has been transformational.
Right.
Carbon price set the way, showed that what was possible. And COVID, ironically, and it's terrible to say there's something good about COVID because of all the negative associations, but shows what is really truly possible when there's a will to do what seems impossible. The fact that I'm here on a Zoom and not there in the room would have seemed 2 years ago impossible. And so we have cut all those emissions of flight. And I think this kind of understanding of the imagination to be ambitious is we need to go further. And whilst I do see the financial sector coming to terms with carbon pricing, coming to terms with experimentation, I would say they're still not taking enough risk. And maybe it's easy to sit on this side, but I do not see money flowing to some of the projects that really need to be taken up if we're to transform the system. And that means that we might have to start looking at the way we measure things differently. And that's what organization of mine are trying to help do, to work to make something that is practical and can really help make that transition.
Yep. This is actually an interesting question. I might ask Uli and Tom quickly what's your tool? What's your most useful tool?
Well, I think the most useful tool that we have available in the financial industry is the ability to take risk. Because if you're not taking risk, we're not going to solve that equation. And I think what we need to get to in our approach to finance of climate transition is that we're measuring the risk in comparison to the right benchmark. Because we are all assuming that the alternative is the maintaining of the status quo. But the status quo has actually a massive cost that is piling up, that we are just ignoring. And if we compare that risk component to the risk that we are taking in investments and in ventures that needs to happen in order to get us to the impact that secures our sustainability, I think that is the equation that we have to crack.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, as a conservationist, I would think a banker is not a risk taker, is a very conservative animal. But in fact, what I've experienced in building instruments with bankers is that there's a lot of willingness to test out new directions and find new models, just as with business. So we have to take off our prejudices about each other sometimes.
I think what you realize with bankers today is there are more and more that understand that the biggest risk is to stand still.
Yeah, exactly. Tom, your most important tool.
Yeah, I think the most important tool in my toolbox is the holistic decision-making processes. Because otherwise I can go down too many dead-end streets and end up with no progress, or worse, going backwards. So the holistic decision-making process is something I learned from a guy called Alan Savory, who came up with the holistic management process, which can be used for any context. He just happened to have used it for trying to use biomimicry design for grazing lands. Now, I use holistic decision-making process to find where are all the synergies, where are the crossovers, and how can I maximize omni-win outcomes. And I think the more we start to center economics, finance, social, and many decisions around omni-win outcomes, and like what gentleman was saying before, was that all the things that were not incentivized and not monetized, but versus all the things that we're paying for, I think this is going to be the big shift. It's seeing all of the hidden value that is there, and that's what a holistic decision-making process uncovers, is that there is so much value that the natural world is providing to us that we take for granted and we discount it. And I think if we adopt holistic decision-making processes and planning, whether in the finance world, whether in governments, in individual lives, it makes us focus on what is really important to us. And I think GDP for a long time was seen as a big metric, and of course we now know that genuine progress and other indicators are needed
Much more.
most desperately.
So it's not only the impact economy we're creating, but it's the holistic impact economy. Oh, there's a big one. Do we have a question from the audience down the back there? Maybe someone can give that person a microphone. Yep, feel free.
Does that work?
Oh, we have a microphone for you.
Insightful sort of panel. It was really helpful. My question is, certain recent big players in certain types of industries have come under fire for brown spinning some of these stranded assets to private equities, and private equity still sweating the asset out. However, there's an illusion of them becoming green, the original owners of the asset. My question to the panel is, what is the finance community currently doing in the space of working with policymakers or regulators in addressing such issue? Because there is a transition phase between taking an asset, which is a stranded asset, which has an end of life that you have to transition over before we provide a more greener solution. What kind of instruments or aspects is being addressed right now? Thank you.
Stranded assets. Who wants to take that one? Felicity.
I was an expert on the European taxonomy, and we looked very hard at this question of transition and what to do about it. And I think one of the things to do about it is to note, when you divest, who buys on, and what responsibility is there for that. Now, Europe can only manage Europe, right? So that's why it's really good news that the taxonomy has got an international platform, and the work around identifying not only what is green and what is not green, but what is really bad, you could call it red, because it's a no-go, and then what is grey. There are things in between. And then the interesting thing about a transition is, do you contribute more to the world by going from red to nearly green? That's a big leap, right? Or do you, when you're grey and you go to green, it's a little leap. So who are we incentivizing? And the conclusion in the taxonomy was everybody has to do everything. Anybody who can, where it's reasonable and needs to do something. And the regulations should sort of ratchet up. So in terms of what your claim is, so you need to identify across your portfolio what it is. Now that works in Europe. And so the answer to your question in a nutshell, because I'm giving you a long-winded answer, is you need international regulation around what is acceptable, and the taxonomy is an extremely good starting point, and it does build on many of the things we've mentioned. It's supported by the UN PRI. It has feed-in from organizations like those represented here today, and I think it is the world's best understanding of how to address that problem. But in China, for example, if you're going to transition out of coal, and you need a slow transition. You can't do some of these things overnight. And so simply to say, I'm just not going to invest in it today is not helpful, as you are referring to. Other people will buy it, and maybe that's not such a bad thing. But you need to have a managed transition. So people need to set goals. The companies, the governments, about divesting and moving away from fossil fuels, and we haven't seen that yet. But we really need that. We need to stop subsidizing fossil fuels. We need to put proper pricing on carbon to make sure that it costs too much to run fossil fuels, and then we'll see with regulation the shift. But you do need all of that, and you need it internationally. So we're on the way to solving it. We're not there yet.
Good. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to a close. All good things have an end. One last sentence from each of you, and we'll start with Tom. How do you wrap up this conversation?
Yeah, well, I'm very encouraged. I would like to see that we focus on drawing down all the atmospheric carbon that is historical, and we put biodiversity and nature-based solutions at the center of financial system. That's my hope. An exit comment coming out of this wonderful panel.
Yay to that. Felicity.
I would say we need to prototype, we need to measure, we need to manage better, and we need to transform. Thanks.
Cool. Very good. Julie.
I would say on this basis of the discussion, I'm hopeful that we really get to a stage where when we talk about externalities and integrating them, we are not only talking about cost, but also about value.
Yeah, really rewarding the good steps, not just preventing the bad.
Well, I would say stay optimistic, be brave, and keep on pushing.
Wow. Okay. And look, thank you, everyone. Not just an impact economy we're going after, it's a holistic impact economy. It's a meaning economy. I want to say thanks to every one of you. You're all soldiers in an amazing battle for peace and for the planet. You are also, every one of you, so this conversation could be had many times over with all of you. Let's get the money. Let's make it work. And thank you particularly to Mercer and to the Impact Hub. This is an extraordinary place and event and process.
Thank you so much to our panel. Honestly, there's nothing that we could add to these really powerful last words that would make a difference at this point. I think the one thing that I just want to share is that it's truly inspiring and motivational to see your commitment to change and your honest commitment to change. And I really hope that this is something we all together can take forward.
I absolutely agree. And while I also don't have words to add, we hope to have found someone who does. Mr. Nicholas Hutter, the founder of New Paradigm Ventures and member of the board of Impact Hub Vienna Association, for our final keynote.